Chapter 23. Understanding that the blood could belong to just about anyone, Katie cautiously took a few more steps toward the door and opened it. It had already been cracked slightly, so she simply nudged it with her shoulder as she kept a hold of the shotgun. She didn't know what she would find inside, but she wasn't going to be caught off guard. The door creaked open. She stepped forward with the barrel of the shotgun pointed inside. She held on to the hope that the blood she had found on the porch wasn't from either one of the couples she was looking for. "Renee? Sam?" she called out. No one responded to her calls, and she slowly started making her way through the house. The only thing pushing her forward was the fact that she needed to know if they were dead or alive. There was no way she would go back to the girls without having that information. But it was growing harder to believe that either one of them could have survived as she slowly crept through the house. The entire place had already been ransacked. But she followed a trail of blood that led her through the home. When she realized the trail led to the back bedroom and the door was closed, she held her breath as she opened it. More than anything, she wanted to close her eyes so she didn't have to see what was on the other side. Although she wanted to close them, she kept them open and ready for anything. The door opened slowly, and she followed the bloody trail inside. She was thankful to see nothing more than cloth that had been ripped from the bedding. But there wasn't any sign of the couple. Katie once again began to hope that the couple had somehow survived the onslaught of gang members. But remembering everything she had seen along the way dashed some of that hope. It was hard to believe that anyone had been able to make it out alive. But knowing that there wasn't anyone else in the house, she proceeded with a quick search. Katie tried to figure out what could have happened to the couple as she made her way from one room to another. Someone had been hurt, but there was no sign of Renee or Sam. Part of her wanted to believe it was a good sign, but it didn't mean they had survived the onslaught that had taken down the majority of their area. When she peeked in what she could only assume was Jenna's room, her heart sank, knowing how much the young girl wanted to see her parents. She wasn't going to give up looking for them, but she had no idea where to start. "Honey, I miss you so very much, but I'm happy you aren't here to see what has become of our home. I don't know what happened here, but I promised Jenna I would get her home, and that's what I plan to do. I just need a little help to figure out where they went." There was a part of her that hoped her husband could hear her, but she wasn't even sure if there was a God anymore. She realized she hadn't prayed since the beginning of the end of the world, but she wasn't sure if it was the right time for her to say anything. If the Creator had decided it was time to end his creation, she was certain he was no longer listening to anyone on earth. It was an infuriating situation. But she pushed those thoughts from her mind and focused on trying to find some clue as to where the couple had headed. She had searched all the rooms and bathrooms, but couldn't find a single thing that would lead her to the couple's whereabouts. Her head spun, and she knew by the amount of blood that had been lost that the injury had, at the very least, slowed them down. Still, without something to tell her where they had gone, Katie wasn't sure what she could tell Jenna. The three of them had already traveled through hell to get as far as they had. But realizing she was only going to be letting the girl down when she told her that her parents weren't there was something she wasn't ready to face. It wasn't until she was back in the kitchen that she found a note from Renee. Picking it up, she read it to herself. "I don't know who will find this, or if anyone even cares at this point. I just want anyone who is looking for us to know Sam was injured. We tried to stay for as long as we could, but it's not safe. We've decided to travel to my sister's place in the country. For anyone who wants to join us, it's about 50 miles west of the city, and she has room to take on anyone who needs help. I don't even know who else could have survived all the things happening around us, but please be careful if you make the journey. It's hard for us to believe anywhere is safe anymore. We are hoping to reconnect with our daughter, but we also understand the possibility that might never happen. If you find this, please know, there is love in the world." covering another 50 miles would be difficult. But it was obvious that they weren't going to be able to stay where they were. There was nothing protecting them from the large number of people who might come back through. She wasn't willing to chance Meredith's or Jenna's lives. Holding on to the note for several seconds, she whispered a soft thank you to Peter, knowing he had led her to the piece of paper. Katie was trying to wrap her mind around the idea of having to walk even farther, but she already knew it was the only option they had left. Taking the note and stuffing it into her pocket, she thought about how she would tell the girls. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was obviously going to be the only chance they were going to have to reconnect Jenna with her parents. Katie was simply glad she had an idea of what direction to go in. Finally being able to breathe again, Katie took a step toward the front door, only to hear someone moving around inside the house. Not wanting to take a chance of actually having to use the shotgun in her hand, she crouched next to the cabinet, practically holding her breath. She held the gun tight to her chest, listening carefully to the footsteps, making their way through the house. For a moment, she thought it was strange that anyone was willing to enter the house in the first place, considering that it was obvious that it had been gone through before she had even arrived. Still, she was well aware of the fact that there would be scavengers all over the place, looking for anything. The problem was, she had no idea if the person in the house was willing to kill for what they were looking for, and she wasn't going to take a chance. Steadily, while holding the shotgun in both hands, she kept her position next to the cabinet. The footsteps had made their way down the hallway and toward the bedroom, but they were slowly starting to move in her direction. She felt her heart pounding inside her chest, and she hoped the footsteps would just disappear out through the front door. The last thing she wanted to do was get into a gunfight. But Katie was ready to protect herself if she had to. Her daughter and Jenna were running through her mind as the footsteps slowly started to move closer. Knowing she would have to be the one to make the first move if she wanted to get a jump on the intruder, she took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. If she needed to use the shotgun, she would. But she didn't want to. As she heard the footsteps get louder, she jumped from her hiding spot with her gun ready and her finger on the trigger. Everything moved in slow motion, and just as she was about to pull the trigger, two figures stepped around the island, and they both screamed simultaneously. Chapter 24. Katie had her finger on the trigger, ready to pull the lever, when she realized that the two figures standing in front of her were none other than her daughter and Jenna. She felt relief wash over her that she wasn't going to have to use the gun, but she was also upset that neither of the girls had listened to her. Her heart pounded as she lowered the shotgun to her side and glared at both of them. She was almost certain that neither one of them knew what had happened, but she was thankful she had hesitated before pulling the trigger. "What in the hell are you two of you doing here? I told both of you that you needed to stay put until I returned." "We got scared when you didn't come back right away," Meredith replied. "That doesn't give you the right to ignore what I told you to do," Katie snapped. "You've seen all the things that have happened around here, and I wanted to get a look at everything before I came back. Tell me why you left the house." "There were a couple of people in the playground at back who looked like they might be trouble." "So since they looked like they could be trouble, you decided to just walk out of the house on your own?" "It wasn't like we were going very far, and I just figured it would be best not to be around those people. I'm sorry we didn't listen." "This isn't like how things used to be. You can't just go around doing whatever you want. The world is far more dangerous than ever before. What would you have done if those people had chased after you?" "We were careful when we left the house. I didn't know how long it would be before you came back. Plus, we weren't sure where you were, and Jenna wanted to check on her parents." "Are they here?" Jenna asked. "I thought they were going to be here when we got here, but I don't see them anywhere." Katie shook her head slowly and pulled the note from her pocket. She never wanted Jenna to think she was lying to her, so she had planned to give her the note anyway. After handing the girl the piece of paper, she patiently waited for her to read her mother's words. There was a look of relief that washed over her, and although she seemed glad to hear that her mother and father were all right, there was some sadness in her eyes as well. She had been waiting to see her parents for the entire trip back home, only to find that they were no longer there. The world had been full of ups and downs from the start of the blackout, but in her mind, she knew this was a good thing. Her heart was pounding from the fact that she had nearly shot at the girls, and she was upset that they hadn't listened to her. Still, Katie had a new destination in mind, and she wasn't going to stop until she was able to reconnect the family again. Taking a moment to catch her breath, after what she had just experienced emotionally, she looked back down at Jenna and smiled. I'm going to stop at nothing to make sure you get back to your parents. It sounds like they waited for as long as they could, but they are alive. We're going to make sure we get you to them. Can we go home now? Meredith asked. We can start rebuilding the house and make sure there is no one around to take it from us. We aren't going to do that. It's not like we can go to the store and buy things to fix up the house. The only thing we can do is move forward. What do you mean? That's our home. We need to make sure Jenna gets back to her family, and I can assure you that this entire area isn't going to be safe for a long time. What are we going to do then? I hope you aren't saying what I think you're saying. We're going to pack as much as we can carry, and then we're going to go to where her mother and father are. There's no point in staying here for longer than we need to, and I don't want us to get caught up in anything else. No, I don't want to keep walking. We've been walking for days, and this was supposed to be where we stopped. I just want to stay home. I'm tired of walking all over the place, and you promised we were going to go home. Meredith, she said. I know you thought this would be how the story would end, but I think this was just a part of what we needed to do. I don't care about any of that, she snapped. I'm not walking anymore, and you can't make me leave. Unfortunately, that's not home for us anymore. We aren't going to have any other choice but to move anyway. But we can't stay here longer than we need to. Katie understood why her daughter was so upset, but staying in their home was not an option. She started to try to reason with Meredith, but her daughter wasn't listening. Before she had the opportunity to try to stop her, the girl turned and started to run outside. Taking a couple of steps in the direction her daughter had just taken off in, she realized she wouldn't go far. The young girl wanted to stay home and would race back to their house, even if they were going to have no choice but to leave it behind again. She didn't like it any more than Meredith did, and she hated the idea of leaving the place she had built with her husband. She hated the idea of the world changing so much that it was nothing as it had been in the past. Although she had already been through a lot herself, she understood how difficult it would be for the children all around the world who had been uprooted. Still, it didn't change the fact that they had no other choice. The people who had caused all the damage they had witnessed weren't far, and it was only a matter of time before they would come back through to try to pick through the rest of the houses that they hadn't grabbed everything from. She found herself in a situation that was impossible to win, but she would do the best she could for the girls. Katie had tried to yell for her daughter, but it didn't stop the girl from racing through the backyard and heading into the direction of their house. She would have to control her temper, and she simply sighed in disappointment. It obviously meant that when she was able to catch back up with her, they were going to have another argument she didn't want to have. It was at that moment that she wished her husband was there with them, knowing he had a way of speaking to Meredith that Katie had never perfected. Still, there was plenty of time for her to learn how to deal with her daughter's outbursts, and even if it took some time, she knew she would have to convince her that they were going to have to leave. Katie, what about the people who were in the park? Did they look that bad? Jenna nodded. They definitely looked like they were going to cause some trouble. I know I wanted to check on my parents, but those people were there and scared us into leaving. Her heart dropped as she thought about the type of people who could be in the area. Even the friends she had run into a little while before were keeping a low profile, meaning the only people who would have been out could be the same people who were part of the group that had destroyed her town. Grabbing Jenna's hand, the The two of them raced out the back door and after her daughter, who had no idea what kind of trouble she was getting ready to run into. Chapter 25. Jenna, would you mind packing things up in the kitchen for me? I need to go check on Meredith. Just do the same thing we did at Beverly's, Katie said. The girl nodded. Even having her daughter out of her sight for a few minutes struck panic in her heart. She hated the idea of anything happening to either of the girls. It didn't take long for Katie to find her daughter. The young girl was sitting on her bed, holding a stuffed animal she hadn't looked at since she had been a young child. Now, watching the tears roll down the girl's face, Katie didn't know how to move forward. Hey, kiddo. We need to get moving soon. We have a lot of ground to cover, and I don't want to linger this close to the city if it can be helped, Katie said. Meredith shook her head. We can't leave. We have to stay here. We don't have any way for him to get a hold of us with the phones down. Katie frowned, unsure of what her daughter was talking about. Though they had several friends in the area and were close with a handful of men, both through Peter and through Meredith's friends, she wouldn't be that concerned about any of them. Whatever was going on, it seemed significantly deeper than a general concern for one of her parents' friends. Sitting down on the edge of her daughter's bed, Katie tried to make sense of what her daughter was going through. Who are you waiting for, sweetheart? Katie asked. Meredith scoffed, rolled her eyes as if her mother should know. At that moment, Katie was confronted with a terrifying realization, but she refused to accept it. Dad, of course. Who else would I be talking about? Come on, Mom. There's no time to play games. He's going to come looking for us once he's all healed up. Oh, sweetheart. Her heart lurched. It was what she had feared. The poor girl obviously hadn't processed her father's death. Katie felt like the wind had been knocked out of her lungs. She didn't know what to say or how to make the situation right again. Katie had simply assumed that her daughter understood Peter was gone and never coming back, since she'd said as much more than once on their journey home. Not once had the idea crossed her mind that Meredith might be blocking out the entire incident, or holding on to some irrational hope that her dad had somehow managed to escape the fiery blaze of the plane's explosion. She wanted to pull her daughter close, but knew any sort of physical touch might set Meredith off. She'd always taken after her father in that regard. There was a time and a place for hugging and showing affection in general. Whenever Meredith or Peter were upset, it was best to just hang back and let them process things on their own. Katie was worried they no longer had the luxury of time on their side. Staying there simply wasn't an option they could consider. Whatever was going through the girl's mind, she'd have to process it on the road. Sweetheart, your father isn't coming back. Shut up, she barked. You don't know what you're talking about. You were just too scared to do anything, but my dad is a fighter. Your father is dead, Meredith. Peter is gone. The man we both loved died over a week ago now. No, you're lying. That's what you do. You lie about things to make yourself feel better, but I'm not going to let you pretend like he's dead. He didn't die, damn it. Meredith, told you he didn't die, she screamed. Meredith was broken at that moment, shaken to the core and unable to hold back any longer, as Katie leaped forward to hold her daughter. Despite Meredith fighting against her, despite her trying to break free and continue believing that Peter would come walking through the door at any moment, the poor child knew better. After several seconds, she went limp in Katie's arms as the sobs racked her body. Katie felt like a failure as a mother for not seeing the signs earlier. It had been a cry for help that Meredith had been acting okay the last few days, and now it was finally coming to a head. Katie knew her daughter had to let it go. She had to process the loss, no matter how much it tore them apart. She no longer cared how long it took. She would sit there until the cows came home, holding on to her if it meant Meredith could find some closure. Peter's memory would always live on in both of them. He'd sacrificed his life to land the plane and ensure that his wife and daughter made it out alive. Without him landing when he had, the odds would have been stacked against them. As she trembled and held Meredith, Katie prayed for guidance and strength. "Why did this happen to us, Mom? Why is he gone?" Meredith whispered. "Oh, my sweet child, I know this is hard right now, but it's not just us. People all over are suffering, losing people they love. The world it's just a shitstorm, but it won't always be like this." "How do you know that?" "Maybe Beverly had the right idea. At least she's with the people she loves." "Hey, now don't you start talking like that, okay? Your father is looking down on us right now and showering us with his love. He's up there rooting for us. And he would be heartbroken to hear you talking like that. He loved you so much." Her voice trailed off as she tried to keep her composure. "He loved you." "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. What are we going to do without him? We can't stay here like you said." "No, but we can go to your grandparents. They've got the farm and animals, and I know they'll be delighted to see us. I hate the idea of leaving this place behind too, but the farm is where we'll be safe." "You don't know, though. You can't promise we'll be safe here or there or anywhere. You said it yourself that the whole world has gone to hell." "I did say that, but I also know I won't ever let anything happen to you, no matter what it takes, okay? We're going to make it out of this. It might be years before the power comes back on, but we aren't going to let that slow us down. From the moment you were born, I knew you were a fighter. Your father did too. That's why we named you after your great-grandmother. She survived the Holocaust, 2 different wars, a famine, and made it here." "Really?" Meredith whispered. "I never knew that." "Oh, yeah. Gigi Meredith was a complete badass for her time. She'd pick off German shoulders from 500 yards out with her little rifle. She's the reason a dozen different families made it out of the occupied countries and are going strong today. Can you believe that?" "Wow," she muttered. She knew her daughter was hurting, but at the mention of Katie's parents' property, her mood seemed to lighten some. It was hard to believe that so much had happened and that they were going strong. Katie had meant every word of what she'd told Meredith. Nothing would stop her from keeping her daughter safe, even if she had to go through hell and back to keep her word. Together, they would find a way to carry on without Peter leading their little family. "What do you say we go help Jenna get things packed up? We need to find her parents and get the hell out of here before something else happens." Meredith nodded and slowly started to stand as she wiped her tears away. It was bad enough that her daughter had been so emotionally drained, but now they had to keep moving. Katie was proud of the way Meredith was handling herself, but knew it had started to take its toll on her young mind. Someday, they would look back on the ordeal and be amazed they made it. But until then, they were going to need to stay strong and hold each other up when there was no one else to take a stand for them. "You know, I'm happy we have you. I don't think I could handle all of this if I didn't. Just knowing Jenna's parents might be in trouble makes me sick to my stomach," Meredith said. "We're going to find them, and when we do, everything will look better for Jenna, too. You two just need to stay strong and keep taking care of each other. Let me handle everything else." She nodded again and started going through her things in preparation for leaving the only home Meredith had ever known. As she worked, Katie slipped out of the room to check on Jenna. She'd meant every word of what she'd said. Never in her life could she have imagined surviving such a harrowing ordeal at their young ages. Yet somehow, the 2 young girls were holding their own. Chapter 26. They worked together to get what they could carry and what her daughter wanted from the house, before setting out once more. It was strange and heartbreaking to be leaving the home they'd worked so hard to build. Yet in her heart, Katie knew it wasn't the same place filled with love and laughter without Peter. They had nothing left holding them there. Though Meredith was obviously drained from the emotional turmoil of losing her father and coming to terms with that fact, she didn't let it slow them down. Once more, Katie found herself incredibly proud of the young woman. The trio ventured out into the road, where a few others from the area milled around. As they made their way to Jenna's to gather a few of her things as well, They were stopped by an elderly couple who lived just up the road. Katie could tell they were nervous about everything happening, and she hated that the only support she could offer was telling them how to survive, which included getting as far away from the larger cities as possible. Jenna's parents had done the right thing by leaving their home behind. At least at the girl's aunt's property, they had some protection. "Are you leaving so soon?" the woman asked. "We thought for sure that you'd be settling down here. Is something wrong?" "We're going to find Jenna's parents at her aunt's house, then we'll be going to my parents' place. Do you folks have anywhere to go?" Katie asked. The man scoffed. "Why on earth would we go anywhere when our home is here? I think people are just overreacting. This whole situation will be back to normal before long. Just wait and see." "I don't think that's going to happen. As a matter of fact, if you can get out of the city, it would be safer." "I've lived here my entire life," he growled. "I'm not going to just up and leave my home to looters because of a little blackout." Katie shook her head. She knew there was no point in arguing with the man. On more than one occasion, she had come across him and knew he was as stubborn as a mule. He would get himself and his wife killed, but Katie couldn't stop him, nor could she force them to join the group on the road. Katie had no desire to take more people with them as it was. It would only create more problems and hardship along the way. "Well, you folks can stay here. That's your decision, but we're leaving. I wish you the best of luck, and maybe we'll see each other again someday," Katie said. Once more, the man snorted and shook his head. "You're taking them girls on a long journey that they don't need to be on. Y'all should hunker down here and stay safe." "You've got your opinion and I've got mine," she replied. His eyes flickered with anger. Katie was accustomed to elderly men talking down to her. Normally, it wasn't something she let get under her skin, considering their generation. There was no way to teach an old dog new tricks, and she didn't have the time or the care to do anything about him. Instead, she stuck out her hand and shook both the man's and his wife's before continuing on, toward Jenna's house. It didn't take long for the girl to gather what she wanted at home, including a few changes of clothing and family mementos. Soon, they were emerging again from the house. She could tell Jenna was excited about getting back on the road and finding her parents. The trip would take them 3 days, 2 if they kept up a good pace. As the girls walked in front of her, she kept her eyes peeled for any signs of trouble or the gangs she knew would be coming to ransack the neighborhood. Katie hated knowing there would be significant loss of life in their area, but she couldn't force those staying behind to listen to her. Instead, she had to come to terms with their fate, just as she had to with so many others. Still, it was hard knowing it might be the last time Katie saw any of them alive. They had nearly made it to the edge of the neighborhood, where highways and smaller roads merged together. At one of the last houses they passed, a man and woman emerged and jogged down the front steps to meet them. Instantly, she was on edge. Though she knew the couple, Hal and Carol, she didn't think very highly of them. It bothered her the way that Hal looked at both of the girls, and she'd heard rumors about his behavior for years. Not only that, but Carol seemed complicit in her husband's actions. Moving to stand in front of the girls, she forced herself to plaster a pleasant smile on her lips. "You're leaving again? You just got back here," Carol said. "Yeah, Jenna's parents left a note telling us where they were going. We're going to take her there, then move on to my parents' place." Hal looked Jenna up and down in a manner that made Katie's skin crawl. "Well, now that doesn't seem safe at all. I'm sure her parents plan on coming back soon enough. Maybe you should leave her with us, and we'll make sure to get her back to her parents." Katie didn't mean to snort, but the idea was laughable. As soon as the noise slipped out, Hal glared at her in a way she knew meant he wasn't happy. She didn't care. She'd been forced to defend herself and the girls before, and she was happy to do it again. "What the hell makes you think she should be out on the road right now? Look at her. Hell, look at them both. They're exhausted. You should at least stay the night." "Absolutely not. We're getting as far away from here as possible." "You're just a little woman, Katie. You couldn't protect these girls if you tried," he said. The man inched a little closer. She knew he wasn't going to try anything in broad daylight, with a dozen witnesses watching. Katie didn't care. She wanted him to know that trying anything was a fatal mistake. In one fluid motion, she swung the shotgun around and shoved it into his plump stomach. Carol gasped as he went pale and took a step back. He was obviously furious at her besting him. "See what I mean, Jenna? She's not safe," he hissed. "You're going to be in danger if you go with her. It's your choice, but you need to stay here with us." "Over my dead body, you creep," Jenna snapped. Katie smiled victoriously, knowing the girl could see through the man's facade. She'd never been so proud of Jenna before in her life. As Carol tugged on her husband's arm to get him to back away, the trio started walking once more. She felt his eyes on them, watching their every move, and wondered if he would try anything. Yet, as the cul-de-sac faded into the distance behind them, her nerves started to ease again. They would be okay, because Katie would stop at nothing to make sure of it. Hal was the least of her worries, after everything they'd seen and endured on their travels. It was nothing more than a bully and a creep. The girl had seen right through him, and at that moment, Katie knew they were going to survive. They both had a fighter buried deep inside. Chapter 27. They traveled for 2 days without incident, though there were a few close calls where they were forced to either hide or run for their lives. Katie didn't have to fire off a single shot. She was happy considering the limited amount of ammunition they had and the attention that shooting the weapon inevitably drew. Keeping a low profile was what they needed to do. They were now just a quarter of a mile from the girl's family by her calculations. It was easy to see that the girls were both elated and a little heartbroken, knowing their time together was coming to an end. She wanted to tell them that it wouldn't be forever, and that they would see each other again. But Katie didn't want to lie to them. She had no idea what the future held. They trailed behind her, talking to each other and making promises to reconnect when the lights finally came back on. Stopping in their hometown had done wonders. Simply having a few personal objects and clothing that belonged to them made all the difference in the world. They'd stayed in the forest mostly, only crossing the road when there was no other option. As a noise in the distance suddenly broke through the peaceful walk, she froze. "Was that a gunshot?" Jenna stammered. Katie nodded. "Yeah." "It came from the direction of my aunt's house," Jenna whispered. Her heart started to race. Katie's eyes darted around the forest. Seeing a small cave nestled amongst the trees, she grabbed both of the girls by their arms and dragged them into the direction of the opening. They both protested, wanting to go with her to see what was happening, but there was no way in hell she would put them in danger. Plus, Katie had no idea what she would be walking into. If she arrived too late to help the family, that was a loss she didn't want Jenna or her daughter to see. They both looked terrified as she took their bags and tossed them into the cave. "Both of you get in there. Do not move until I come back for you. Do you hear me?" she said. Another shot fired off in the distance as her heart pounded. "Mom, we don't want to stay here. I don't care what you want, Meredith. I don't care that you both want to be part of this. Do you understand me? Right now, the only thing that matters is that I know the two of you are safe. I can't help anyone if I'm worrying about you. Now I need you to promise me that you're going to stay put." "Mom, promise me," she snapped. Jenna and Meredith both went pale. It was the first time she'd let the panic seep into her voice. It wasn't how she wanted the conversation to go, but she had to make them understand just how dangerous their situation was. After several tense seconds, and another shot going off in the distance, they both nodded in agreement. Watching them climb into the cramped space after making sure neither of them was exposed to anyone who might be walking past, she darted away from them in the direction of the gunshots. It could be nothing, simply a few folks working on target practice. But she had to be sure before she took any risks when it came to the girls. Moving at a dead sprint, she didn't stop until the forest cleared and she could see the homestead across the road. When she saw it, her heart sank. Just as she feared, the family wasn't firing off random shots. Instead, there were 4 men all lined up in the driveway with guns, pointed at the foursome, now standing with their hands raised on the front porch. She had to act fast, or risk one of them losing their lives. Bringing her gun around, Katie took a deep breath and slipped off the safety. She took aim at the man on the end, knowing her aim wasn't spot on and not wanting to risk hitting one of the innocent captives. The shot bellowed out across the land as the man dropped to the ground, the tiny pellets hitting their mark as he died screaming. Instantly, 2 of the men spun around and started firing at her. But the third was distracted by the woman bolting off the porch in his direction. Katie cursed under her breath. She didn't need anyone playing the hero. Moving to the side, she fired off 2 more shots at the men, but they bolted into the forest, where she wouldn't have a clean shot. Swinging back to take down the remaining man, her heart dropped to her stomach. The woman, Jenna's aunt, she had to presume had gotten herself taken hostage by the rogue gunman. The others watched in horror as he pressed a handgun to her skull and screamed out orders for Katie to drop the weapon. The man was outnumbered, though, and as she slowly started to lower the gun to the ground, Jenna's father bolted forward and tackled the guy from behind. Without his comrades, it was a fight he was destined to lose. He jumped back to his feet, reaching for his gun, but Katie was ready for him. She fired off a single shot that dropped the man back to the ground. "Katie!" Mrs. Rosin yelled. "Oh my God, you don't know how happy we are to see you." "Where is she?" Mr. Rosin asked, his tone somber. "In the woods, hiding with Meredith. They're both safe." The woman raced to her, pulling Katie into her arms, despite them barely knowing each other. Jenna's parents had never been social people, whereas Katie and her family were outgoing and socialized with the entire neighborhood. They were good people, though, if not a little reserved and quiet. Moments later, she pulled away from Katie as the tears rolled down the woman's face. "We knew she would be safe with you. We just knew it. You've always watched over her. I don't know how we can ever thank you for this." "There's no need to thank me. I know you would have done the same for Meredith if the shoe were on the other foot," Katie said. Mr. Rosin looked around. "Is Peter with the girls? Did he stay back with them?" Katie cringed and shook her head. "No, Peter didn't make it. Our flight went down over a lake in Tennessee. If it hadn't been for him, none of us would have made it out alive. Unfortunately, though, his injuries were too serious." "Oh my God, you poor thing," Mrs. Rosin whispered. "You mean to tell me that you got them both here all on your own?" "My God, Katie," Mr. Rosin stammered. "I am so sorry for your loss. I just can't imagine pushing on like that without your partner. The girls, though, they're safe?" She nodded. "Safe. And they've been troopers. We've had a few close calls over the last couple of weeks, but every time they've stood their ground and done exactly what I've told them to do to stay alive. When we got to the cul-de-sac and found your note, neither of them flinched. They were ready to hit the road again." "Oh, the neighborhood. Is it standing?" Mrs. Rosin asked. She nodded. "Yeah, but I don't know how long it'll stay that way. I tried to talk a couple of other families into leaving, but they wouldn't budge." "That doesn't surprise me," Mr. Rosin growled. "People have no idea how bad things are going to get." Suddenly, she heard a noise behind her and whipped around, ready to fire again, when she saw Jenna bolting from the forest. At the sight of their daughter, Jenna's parents crumpled into tearful messes, meeting her halfway across the yard to pull her into their arms. The joyful reunion was everything Katie had prayed the girl would have. It was pure luck that they had arrived just in the nick of time. A few minutes later, they might not have been able to save any of the foursome. Looking back to the forest, she waited for her daughter to emerge. Yet Meredith didn't appear. Fear gripped her, the pounding in her chest almost painful as her gaze darted around in a desperate attempt to locate her daughter. As her eyes frantically fell on Jenna, Katie knew the two had separated. But while Jenna had made it through the woods to her aunt's house, Meredith wasn't by her side. She felt like she would be sick as she grabbed hold of the girl, despite her parents' protests. For nearly 2 weeks, she'd kept her safe, but now only her daughter mattered. Chapter 28. "Where's Meredith?" Katie snapped. "I thought I told the two of you to stay together." I don't know," Jenna said. "I thought she was right next to me when we started to run. Why didn't you just stay where I told you to? When was the last time you saw her and where was she going?" I honestly don't know. The only thing I know is that a couple of men came into the cave and we both got scared. We took off running, but we got separated from each other. I thought she was right behind me when I came out here." "Where did you last see her?" "Running out of the cave at the same time I did. But when I turned around, she was gone." "Are you sure that's the last place you saw her?" Jenna nodded. With her heart racing, Katie spun around and raced in the direction of the cave, where she had left the girls when the gunshots rang out. By the time she reached the forest, she was nearly in full panic and hoping she would find her daughter right where she had left her. Unfortunately, as she approached the front of the cave, she didn't see any sign of Meredith anywhere. She came to a stop and bent over, placing both hands on each of her knees and glancing in every direction. There was nothing that told her what direction her daughter had run off in, and she wasn't even sure where to go from there. Knowing Jenna had told her there were a couple of men who had entered the cave, she took a couple of steps in the direction of the entrance. It was everything Katie could do to control the emotions surging inside of her, and she was mere moments away from panicking. Still, no matter what she felt inside, she had a sense of urgency in the way she moved. The only thing that mattered was finding her daughter and making sure the young girl was safe. Just as she approached the entrance to the cave, something to her left caught her eye. Not wanting to waste any more time, Katie simply glanced in that direction and noticed a small piece of Meredith's shirt that had been ripped on a thorn bush. It was hanging on one of the branches, and she walked over and pulled it off. Although she had believed Jenna from the start, the thought of her daughter running from 2 men chasing her was enough to make Katie hold her breath for several seconds. With the direction showing itself to her, she started to walk at a fast pace, past the bush where she'd found the shred of clothing. Katie hadn't been walking for more than a minute when she heard her daughter screaming up ahead of her. Without thinking about the group she was leaving behind, she raced forward toward the screams. The only thought on her mind was rescuing her daughter from whatever was happening to her, and she no longer cared about anyone but Meredith. As she dashed through the woods, dodging branches sticking out in her path, she felt her heart pounding inside of her. Her breath was labored, but the safety of her daughter continued to push her forward. Although she had a general direction in which to travel, she wasn't exactly sure where Meredith had gone. The screaming stopped for several moments, and Katie paused to gain her bearings. She knew which way to head, but she was looking for something more to guide her way. Suddenly, she noticed several small branches that had been broken, along with a few footprints, and she chased after her daughter. The crushed leaves were her main guide. She was no longer able to hear any sounds her daughter had been making just moments before, and she grew concerned that the men who had been chasing her had been able to catch up and grab her. The thought was something she pushed from her mind, knowing no matter what it took, she would bring her daughter back with her. Even as determined as she was, she felt like she was losing hope. She had no way of knowing how many men there were, or what they were going to do with her daughter, and at that moment she thought about her husband. In some strange way, she felt like the man she had loved for years was by her side, and with a ragged breath, she spoke to him out loud as she ran. "I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure our daughter comes home safely. We both miss you, but I know you would want us to keep pushing forward. It's exactly what I plan to do. I'm going to find her, and I wanted you to know I am going to keep my word about protecting her until the very end." Through everything they had been through up to that point, she had only prayed for their safety a couple of times. She was once again thinking about the fact that God was nowhere to be seen throughout it all, and she was certain that if he was answering any prayers, it wasn't anywhere around where they were currently located. It wasn't anything she was proud of. She wished she had more faith in the Almighty. The problem was that every time she turned around, They were finding more and more trouble along the way. Right then and there, though, she prayed for God to watch over her child. Katie knew it would take every ounce of strength she could muster to make sure that Meredith came back with her. She was willing to do whatever she had to, but there was a part of her hoping she wouldn't have to use her gun again. No matter what the world was doing to each other, she was tired of seeing death all around her. Knowing there was a good chance it would come to that, she forced herself to push through thoughts from her mind and keep running. The terrain through the forest made it difficult to keep her footing, and although she had slipped to the ground several times, she was focused on reaching her daughter and bringing her back to the group in one piece. There was a small voice in the back of her mind, telling her she was about to exchange her own life for her daughter's, and she almost didn't care if that's what it took. She followed the trampled leaves and broken branches as she raced as fast as she could up the side of the hills, in the woods. She could sense a temperature drop due to the fact that the trees covered everywhere the sun would normally hit. Aside from feeling that it was actually a little colder running through the forest, she didn't notice anything else. She focused on making sure she was able to find Meredith. But even through the small gaps in the trees above her, it was obvious that the sun would go down soon. Not only was she fighting to find her daughter, she was fighting against time itself. If she wasn't able to get to her daughter before the sun set for the day, it would make things all that more difficult. Between praying to God and talking to her deceased husband, Katie felt as though she was losing her mind. "Peter, I need you. I don't know if you're out there or not, but I need your guidance. I don't know what they're doing to her or what they're going to do or where they took her, but I'm so lost without you here." Part of her knew she was simply talking to herself and that no one was out there listening, but she needed all the help she could get. Although she knew he wasn't going to hear her, she felt reassurance as she spoke. It was, at that moment, that she knew nothing would stop her from finding Meredith, and it didn't matter how deep into the night it took her. She wasn't going to let her daughter or her husband down. No one would break up her family any further than it had already been. Chapter 29. Through a few of the openings in the woods, she realized she had a little more time than she had first anticipated. Katie was following every broken branch she came across. But as the hours passed, she was once again starting to lose hope that she would ever find Meredith. It wasn't until she came to another clearing in the woods and looked up that she realized the sun was about to set, and it was only a matter of time before she would be looking for her daughter in the dark. There had been many more times she had prayed out loud and also spoken with the spirit of her husband, but none of it had been of any use to her. It might have been something that was helpful at the beginning of her search, but receiving no answer from the people she was talking to had created an emptiness inside of her. Taking a deep breath and exhaling slowly, hoping to get rid of the burning feeling in her lungs, Katie pressed on. The trail had started to grow cold as the branches and the footsteps she had been following started to fade away. The only thing she could do was to continue in the same direction for as long as it took, but even that started to grow monotonous. Her only hope was that she knew she was never going to give up on her daughter. Up ahead, through the trees and shrubs in her path, she saw another clearing. The only difference between the one she was headed towards and the one she had already passed was the fact that she could see a flicker of a fire burning through the empty spots between the leaves. Holding tightly to the shotgun she had been carrying with her, she slowed down slightly, knowing there were people ahead of her. As she reached the edge of the woods, she stayed behind the trunk of a large tree, concealing herself from anyone who might be looking in her direction. Crouching slightly to get a better look, she noticed there were several fires burning throughout the clearing. Took her a couple of moments trying to see through the dusk and flickering lights of the flames, but she realized the fires were all burning around a single large house. It was then she also started to count the number of people, but stopped counting when she reached double digits. Panic started to set in. realizing she was strongly outnumbered. It was by far one of the biggest groups she had come across in their journey up to that point, but she was determined to find her daughter. The old 2-story farmhouse that was the center of the many burning fires was her focal point, and her eyes continued to scour the area for any sign of Meredith. When she glanced just to the right of the house, she noticed a fence that had once created a backyard. Her heart dropped as she recognized her daughter as one of 6 young women and men. Katie stayed back, trying to understand the type of people she was dealing with. As the group made their way from one fire to another, passing the young men and women who were tied up, they spat in their direction and threw insults along the way. It was difficult for Katie to understand the point of what they were doing, but all of her panic and concern faded away, slowly being replaced by a rage inside of her she had never felt. Although she was willing to do whatever was necessary to save her daughter, she knew she would save the others as well. She had no idea where her sudden bravery came from, other than the fact that she carried a motherly instinct with her that wouldn't be denied. As she tried to find any pattern she could to help her infiltrate the camp, she thought about her husband and knew he was there right by her side. Nothing else explained the courage she suddenly felt to attack an area she was outnumbered in. As the rage continued to boil inside of her, she slowly stood. Katie was just starting to raise the barrel of her gun toward the group, hoping to take a few of them down before moving in. Without warning, she heard the rustling of leaves behind her. Startled, Katie turned back to the direction she had come from, ready to pull the trigger if she needed to. She was stunned to find 2 women and a man, and she didn't hesitate to point the barrel of her gun in their direction. To her surprise, the man dropped the gun he was carrying and raised his hands. Both of the women who were with him did the same, and she simply stood in the same place, glaring at all 3 of them. "I promise we aren't here to hurt you," the man said. "Why are you following me then?" I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but we've actually been trying to track down this group as well." Katie scoffed. "Don't think I'm going to trust you just because you say something. What are you doing here?" Although she had been looking in the direction of the man, she took her eyes off him for just a moment to look back at the 2 women. She was shocked that they were claiming to have been tracking the group, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to trust them at all. As the 3 people who had snuck up behind her glanced in each other's direction, Katie found herself holding the gun in their general direction. If the end of the world had taught her anything, it was that she was unable to trust almost anyone. "Are one of you going to answer my question? I don't want to shoot you, but if it means I'm going to have a chance to get my daughter back, then I'm going to do whatever it takes," Katie said sternly. The man sighed. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it. That farmhouse used to belong to my parents." "Well, where are they now?" "As soon as the power went out, I decided to make my way back here to check on them and make sure they had everything they needed. When I got here, I found them both murdered." "Do you think this group is the one responsible?" He nodded. "It only makes sense that the people who came and killed my parents and left their bodies to rot in the fields would take the house as a trophy. I want to make them pay for what they did to my family." Katie wasn't sure if she should trust any of them, but if the man's rage was even remotely close to the anger she felt inside, she understood the certain urge to seek revenge. If anything, she wanted to do the same thing to those men who had taken Meredith. She thought about the situation she found herself in for several moments, before deciding that the only chance she had to save Meredith was if she joined forces with the 3 people standing in front of her. Slowly lowering the barrel of her gun, she took a couple of steps forward toward them and nodded. The only way she would know if she could trust them or not was by listening to their story. But the one thing that didn't make sense was why those 3 people would be willing to take on more than 20 just to get revenge. It honestly didn't make sense to her that they would throw their lives away. But she suddenly realized that one or more of the other young ones tied to the fence next to her daughter could be some relation to the women. It was at that moment that she made her decision to hear them out. "Tell me what you're doing here. I know it's not about getting revenge for the death of your parents."